for now, we're here to talk
For now.
about the best and worst.
We
of
might
the
be talking about Mike
2025.
Tomlin coming up.
We very well might be. The 2025 NFL head coaches, looking at the top 5, the bottom 5, and what we think, or where we think these guys rank. We talked about this right before we went on. It wasn't a terribly difficult list to put together, Mark. For me, maybe I had a little bit more difficulty, especially towards the back portion of the top 5. I felt like there were actually quite a few candidates I can put there, and a couple key ones that I have left off. So yeah, I mean, we didn't really talk about this with the wide receivers, the running backs and the quarterbacks when we did the list, but I'm curious, like what criteria did you use when you were kind of evaluating how you did this?
Yeah, so I try to stay true to what I've done so far, which is basically say, Mark, you own the Chicago Bears and you have the first pick in all of this, right? Where you're looking at like, okay, I could choose the first quarterback. Who am I going to choose, right? I could choose the first running back. Who am I going to choose? And it's only guaranteed for this year. I looked at it that way to say, hey, I'm for a head coach. To me, I'm looking at someone. It's like not necessarily your history is important, but it's like, hey, do you understand 2025, 2026 modern NFL football? And are you someone that if I gave the keys to run my organization, I feel really confident about? So history plays into that, obviously, because it shows you've done it before. But I also think there's going to be maybe some names on this list for me that don't necessarily have the resume that other coaches do. But I also think there's a lot of head coaches right now that are living on a resume versus living on, are they really in 2025 an elite head coach for modern NFL football? So that was my thought. My thought was you get to choose. These are guys, and the same on the back end. If you told me you got the last pick and these are what you're staring at, I'm going to be really frustrated. Like, oh God, these are my choices. Oh, I throw a dart at the wall. I hope I like that about you. You know what I mean? So that's kind of the same, the vibe I was going. Resume matters, but I feel like I'm going to be maybe defending some of my choices just based on, in my opinion, the vibes of how I feel that person runs a locker room in today's NFL.
It's hard because I tried to like give some of the more CEO types their due, but you also can't ignore the value of a head coach being a skilled coordinator, particularly offensively. And so I had to weigh production in terms of like how has their team actually performed during this time? What are their,
it's not a Hall of Fame vote.
Speak of, right? Yeah. Absolutely. And so I think the same for me. There's probably going to be a couple that maybe would surprise some people or some head scratchers in here that I'll have to explain my thought process behind a little bit more. There's one coach in particular that I think is the most difficult to talk about when it comes to this list, and we'll get there when we get there. But I think we should start with the bottom 5 this time.
Oh, okay.
Throwing a wrench into things. We've been starting with the top 5. Maybe we start with the bottom 5 because I think perhaps this would be less controversial anyway. We'll save the good stuff for later.
I like that. I can start us off with the bottom 5. I think for me, we talked before we went on the air. I think there is something about it's hard not to just put all rookies on here. And I certainly didn't want to just lump in, oh, you're a rookie, I don't know what you're talking about. But I do think one of the problems is we've seen with rookie head coaches, you and I will be the first to admit, when a guy like Nick Sirianni got hired, we were both like, don't like that. The press conference, ew, gross. And now we sit here and he's got 2 trips to Super Bowl and a ring. It's like, well, okay, well, you never really know what you're going to get out of these rookie head coaches. So I also think it's fair to say, with no resume, a lot of these guys maybe belong to the list. So I'm going to go with Schottenheimer at 32, the Cowboys head coach. I think there's a reason he hasn't been given the opportunity to be a head coach yet at this point in time. He's got his opportunity. This is it. Jerry is throwing you that life preserver and says, hey, here's Dak Prescott, here's CeeDee Lamb, here's George Pickens, and go try to compete. And we'll see. At least there's the one thing I'll say for him in this situation is he does get continuity, right? He was with them last year. So he's not like totally unfamiliar with the building, with everyone. It's like a promotion within your own organization. We'll see how he handles it, but I think it's fair to say he belongs in this bottom 5. I have him at 32. I go Gannon from Arizona at 31. And that might seem a little harsh, but we've talked about it before. He's a defensive guy now who's had 2 years, and the defense hasn't jumped off the stat sheet. The defense hasn't taken over that division. And offensively, you've had Kyler Murray, you've had Marvin Harrison Jr. last year, you've had a really good running back in James Conner, and yet it still just feels like, what's the identity of this team? Where's the true north of this team? This is a huge prove-it year for them. I just think to myself, he's a defensive guy. I don't love that in the modern NFL. And he's a defensive guy that hasn't proven to me that he at least makes, well, I can't sit here and go, dude, well, at least the Cardinals defense is insanely good. Look at what the Rams have done with their young defense with 2 different coordinators in the last 2 years. I mean, Sean McVay has a culture that lets that defense, it's like, wait, what's happening in Arizona? Now, maybe you could argue it's a GM problem, not a coach problem. It's hard for me to see the separation. I still can't get over explosive pew, pew, pew. I think he's a little odd at the microphone, and I haven't seen results yet. So I'd be scared to touch Gannon as my head coach. At number 30, I'm going to go Liam Cohn, Jacksonville Jaguars. A couple things here. As an offensive guy, I like a lot about what Cohn has done. I like that Cohn has bounced from college to NFL, back to college to back to NFL. Like, he's willing to go where he thinks there's a good job. And sometimes going back to college, like, just because it's a good situation, like, that shouldn't be thought of as a demotion, especially in today's NFL. What he did with Baker after the season that Baker had with Canales, you start to say to yourself, wow, like, they didn't miss a beat. So he stepped in and was able to institute some differences, get Bucky Irving incredibly involved in the offense, more so than they had 2 years ago with the run game. And also Baker threw for 40 touchdowns. Knowing that he had the freedom with that offense, that's really exciting. What I don't like about Liam Cohn, why he's maybe lower than a couple other names here, really rough press conference. I don't know if he is a leader of men. I don't know if that matters as much in 2025 NFL, if it did in 2013 NFL. But I think there's something to it. I also think Jacksonville's a little bit snake bitten, so he might just be a really good coach, but in a bad situation. But how am I supposed to differentiate that? I don't know. My vibes would not be high if I'm picking 30th of the head coach draft and I'm an organization and I'm looking at those 3 names, Schottenheimer, Gannon, and Cohen. I would take Cohen over the other 2 because it's a little bit of the unknown, but I wouldn't feel great. I will tell you this, okay. If I was picking at 29, I would take this guy ahead of Cohen and ahead of Gannon and ahead of Schottenheimer. That's the way I thought of it, but narrowly, and that's Aaron Glenn with the Jets. Another rookie head coach. But what I get from Aaron Glenn is, damn, that guy commands a room. And that guy's a former NFL defensive player who played at a very high level. And he's been in coaching now for a long time and worked his way up. But he's not like a 70-year-old guy who's getting his first opportunity. He's earned this opportunity. We also know in Detroit, that defense, he made the most with little. We would all argue the personnel in that defense the last 2 years, not great. And he was able to turn it into something that played complementary football and that you had to at least account for, even last year when they lost Hutchinson. So I think there's something to that. And remember, Dan Campbell is not a defensive guy. People think of him as like a meathead defensive guy. He's a meathead offensive guy. He played tight end.
Yeah.
So Glenn had a lot of free roam with that defense and got to lead that defense. So I would look at those 4 guys so far in this list. Again, if I'm picking 29 in this draft, that's how I think of it. And I'd go, fuck it. I'm going with Glenn because I at least respect the dude and I'm afraid of him. So I'm not really afraid of the other guys. So at least I'll have that in my locker room. At number 28, my final pick. This is someone who, again, not a pure rookie head coach, someone who I don't have a lot of good tape on, I guess would be the best way to say it. But I do love the way he handled a really, really bad first year, and that's Callahan in Tennessee. I'm going to put Callahan at 28. Listen, you can only go off of what we saw last year, and what we saw was the team that was picking first overall. And what we saw is a defense that wasn't great. And what we saw was an offense that lacked a ton of structure and an offense that lacked a ton of identity. But I also saw a coach who was very, very tough on a quarterback. And I kind of like that. And I also know he's a coach that worked with Joe Burrow and that offense in Cincinnati. So he understands what modern 2025 good NFL football should be. If I'm, again, picking at number 28 in this draft, I would look at Callahan. I'd say, I'll take that experience and that offensive and the way he handles the microphone, even though I don't love a lot of the way the season went, over the other guys on this list. So again, that's the way I thought of it. That's the way I broke it down. There are 5 names that I considered then right there in the mix. So I'm interested to see if any of those 5 names make your list, and then we can kind of go over our extra guys who just missed the cut of the bottom 5. But that's who I went with, and I think I can't imagine yours is too crazy different, but maybe it is, and I'm very interested then to hear where you go with it.
No, it's not too crazy different. There are a couple names that are swapped in and out, but we both agree with 32 being Brian Schottenheimer. He's also the guy I just know least about, and maybe that's because he hasn't been running, storied offenses throughout his career, and you're just hearing about this guru, but he never gets a head coaching job. Just really didn't hear much about him to begin with. So this is more about ignorance than it is anything else. And it's a tall order to be the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, and there's pressure that comes with that. There is a level of uncertainty as to how much command he'll actually be allowed to have over the team. So that's gonna be difficult to evaluate how his first year goes, because we still just don't know how much Jerry Jones really has his hands in a lot of stuff. But yeah, that's 32 there. For me, 31 was Liam Cohen. That's also because, he's had a good run as an offensive coordinator in this league. He's worked under Sean McVay. He replaced Kevin O'Connell there as the OC for the Rams. But then he left, right afterwards to go back to Kentucky. And then he ended up coming back and obviously fared well with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last season and really helped with Baker Mayfield's resurgence. So there's a light of positivity there from Cohen. But there's also that uncertainty of he hasn't really done it for very long. He had a good run with Baker Mayfield, but how much was that? Things are already in place, talented veteran-led roster. Todd Bowles is clearly establishing himself as like a very solid NFL head coach. He's never going to be the top 10, but he's never going to be in the bottom 5. And so that just, there's a lot of questions, as there are really with the majority of this bottom 5 list, because we just don't have enough information. But I'm skeptical of Liam Cohen. I also think it's extremely important for Jacksonville and for Trevor Lawrence. Like, this has to work, because if we're talking about Trevor Lawrence going on to his 4th head coach,
in 2 years, you'll be moving on from a quarterback and you're going into a new coach.
We're talking this guy needs to get traded, or Trevor needs to, play out the rest of his career really not, unfortunately, elevating at that point. 30, Aaron Glenn. Um, I think this is like the one guy on this bottom portion that I would say, okay, I believe in his ability as a CEO. Um, he seems, at least early on, to be kind of a hard ass, which can definitely work, obviously. But I just wonder if, with today's like modern athlete too, that can easily go south, right? And you can just
We saw
lose
it
a
with
locker
Brian
room
Flores.
instantly. Yes, yeah, it's a great point. Urban Meyer to a lesser extent because I think he was ill-equipped in many ways, but that's one of them for sure. Where I own everything about this, and you're gonna do as I say and listen to me, and all of
It's
that.
the NFL, not college.
I don't know too much about his reputation, so maybe that's a harsh criticism. Uh, and I know that he definitely got along with all of his defensive players there, but yeah, combining the defensive side with his seemingly maybe too pushy personality there, that could be a little bit difficult there in New York of all places as well. For me though, at 29 is Kellen Moore, and I put Kellen Moore here because I have a lot of questions about how much these offenses that he's been the coordinator of over the last few years was really all him, or was it the head coach who also happened to be
An
offensive
offensive
head
guy.
coaches during this run? Not to mention, he has worked with some really good quarterbacks during this time, right? Dak Prescott being the worst among them, and he's a pretty solid, NFL quarterback. And so I don't, and not to mention also that all of these teams kind of like gave up on Kellen Moore. He didn't get promoted to the Cowboys head coach or given that, opportunity. Instead, they decided to, part ways, right? And give that McCarthy that last run. And then, his obviously a very great year in Philly. Do we attribute that to the coordinating of the offense?
The
I don't know.
great
I think we attribute a lot of
personnel.
their success to Howie Roseman.
Yeah.
This is the best case of roster makeup than anything else in the league. And so while Kellen Moore may be actually very good, I'm pumping the brakes on giving all of the credit because he's had great players to work with during his time as an offensive coordinator, and these teams haven't fought tooth and nail to keep him. And then Brian Callahan is my last in line there at 28, and that's just because despite some good things I saw, like I give him credit for being willing to say we're done with the Will Levis experiment, right? Like we're gonna give Mason Rudolph. We're gonna try and get this back on the ship. It seemed like the team did buy in to a lot of what he was doing. You still ended up producing a pretty rough season overall.
Yeah.
And so you got to wear that right now. Next year, he may bump himself way out of this into, the top 15 or something.
Yeah.
But I got to throw some production into there. So yeah, it looks like the only one that I left off was Jonathan Gannon. And the reason I did want to address that real quick, because I think he's one of those coaches that's kind of quietly like, okay, and probably will be his whole career. I don't know. It depends how long he's a head coach. But I mean, yes, his defense wasn't flashy and like off the charts, but Mark, they went from 31st in the league his first season to 15th in total defense last year.
Okay.
So like that's a huge jump. And so I got to give him some credit for that. Offense went up in terms of yards and points from 19 to 11th and 24th to 12th respectively. So like things were turning the corner. I mean, I kind of feel like Kyler is just not a good a good quarterback to have in terms of a leader. He's talented and stuff, but that's kind of a tall order to ask a head coach to, hey, here's our, $250 million quarterback. You got to make this work. I'm a defensive coach. I'll get the defense right, but there's a floor or a ceiling to what we can accomplish with Kyler Murray. So it's hard for me to fault him too much on that. I mean, they went from 4 wins to 8 wins, so they've had had increases. You know, there
So
was improvement.
that's all valid. I took all of that into consideration. I think where I wanted to make a statement with Gannon is he's the perfect example of like a guy where it's like, as a defensive guy, I'm already gonna prefer offensive, right? Like we both
Yep.
agree, like
Yep.
you're gonna lean offensive.
And you
And
don't see it come through the defense. You don't
I
see
don't
this
see, and
identity
I
of
also don't just see his presence. Like, you know, it's a lot like Eberflus. The thing that killed me with Eberflus was it's like, dude, you were a middle linebacker in college. Like, and then you get on the podium and it's very like PC talk,
stoic and
stoic. And I'm like, where's this like guy who was like a psycho middle linebacker? You know what I mean? Like, and I don't want everyone to be Dan Campbell, but that's proven to work, right? Like players respond to that. So there's also like a couple other names. I'm going to list them off here that I think I could have inserted in there as like the defensive guy who just doesn't have the juice, and that I think can handle the job of being a head coach, can be a head coach. But I would just feel like I'm just waiting to get my next head coach while I have him. And that, to me, Gannon best represented that. And so that's kind of why I wanted him on the list. And also, like I said, I didn't want to just throw a bunch of rookies on there. So the names I would say that are in consideration for like 20 through 21, right? So like the next group of guys, let me see if you have any pushback on this. Raheem Morris, Dave Canales, Moore, and this is no order. Dable, and then I would put Ben Johnson in that group as well. Ben Johnson, I think I would prefer. I'm really intrigued by all the things, the intangibles, and so screw it. I'm going
the shiny new toy.
The shiny new toy. So, but I do think in general, like as you're going resume, in this exercise, it makes sense to him to be in more of the talk towards the bottom. But is there a name that I missed, or is there a name you strongly disagree with out of those?
No, not a name. I don't think you missed much there. Like nothing jumped out to me and as being egregious in any way. I do think Raheem Morris is like very much on that, like, you know, short list of, you know, chopping block type of candidates.
Yeah.
And then, you know, and then you get into you know, whether or not a guy like Mike McDonald, like how, you know, how much of an elevator is he? And then you get like, and then you enter Todd Bowles territory and stuff like that.
Yeah,
but
Todd
I do
Bowles
agree.
is interesting. You know,
he's hard because he's very solid, very solid.
Well, yeah,
clearly.
they've won the division the last 2 years with Baker and two different offensive coordinators. Like, he has held up that ship. They have not fallen off the map. Like I predicted 2 years ago. I wear it wholeheartedly. I've turned around on Todd Bowles. At this point, I would consider him closer to that top 15 than I would the bottom. I think there's names. I think
I think Mike McDaniel needs to be put on notice a little bit more.
He's in an interesting group.
He hasn't won big games.
Dan, he's in an interesting group. So I wanted to bring up his name. His name, I think, belonged with Shane Steichen. And then I would say, I thought I had one more. Where did that name go? No, I'm thinking of something else. Those two guys are younger offensive guys that I think we both would agree. If taking a flyer on them, like, yeah, I'm going to take a flyer on them ahead of a lot of the guys we've already named, but there's question marks. Zach Taylor, maybe it was the other name that could float in there. Now they did make a Super Bowl run with Joe Burrow, but it's been a rough couple years up and down. Now he did make the backup play really well 2 years ago. You know what I mean? Like, so he's a tough case. Is he just a product of Cincinnati, or is he actually a product of just Joe Burrow? I'm not. It's hard to say. And then there was a guy. I think Pete Carroll. Like I floated Pete Carroll for maybe being in consideration to closer to 20 than closer to 10. Because again, I'm going off of not your just resume. If we're talking about who are Hall of Fame coaches, Pete Carroll's in the top 5. I mean, Pete Carroll, I think, will end up in the Hall of Fame. But if you're just
Yeah,
talking
and
about
you're saying top 5 of current head coaches, not of
current,
all time.
current, let's do this again. You're starting your franchise. I'm certainly not. Pete Carroll's like Aaron Rodgers. He'd be in that quarterback draft. You're like, screw it. For a year or two, I'll take him probably around 18 over some other guys, but I'm not prioritizing Pete Carroll. All right. Top 5. I think there's going to be some disagreement here, and I'm ready for it. How do we want to do this? Do we want to do what we did and kind of go back pick for pick, bar for bar?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's go back and forth.
Do you want to start at 1 or 5? I think 1 is more like ending on 5 is gonna be more interesting. I think because
it is. Yeah, we'll start with 1.
So
I think we're both gonna have the same one.
Andy Reid is 1.
Yeah.
Okay.
We should. I don't even think we like. We don't even need to like spend time on.
No, I think
that because that's pretty much a given.
I don't think so either. I think he is quickly maybe becoming legitimately in the consideration for greatest coach of all time. Like, I mean, he's putting up the resume. So Reid at 1. I have McVay at 2. What do you have at 2?
Same.
Okay.
Same.
I love to see that.
There.
We're again, I think you've come around a little bit more to me. I was on McVay is better than Shanahan like 3 years ago when we were doing shit like this. And you were not. And I think you've come around to my side of like what he has done as like a CEO head coach while being offensive leaning. It's really impressive. And in that division, which is really tough.
Especially last year. Last year was an incredible year for
young. No Aaron Donald, young defense. That defense, again, whatever he does with hiring these new defensive coordinators, hiring new offensive coordinators, he is constantly changing coordinators, and it doesn't really affect the overall Rams vibe. When they're healthy, he has them as one of the best teams in football. And I truly think they were the second best team in the NFC last year at the end of the year, and truly the only team maybe in the NFL that could go toe-to-toe with the Eagles at the end of last year. We saw it in the playoffs. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
I am
you think 3 is where we're gonna part?
I think so, because I think you're gonna think I'm crazy, but I'm gonna say it again. I look at this list the way I've said it is if I'm picking 3rd and those 2 guys are off the board and I'm looking, I go, my thought process was this. I need someone who can guarantee me that my organization is going to be well-run, professional, and is going to be in the conversation to win and win soon. I don't know if it's going to win 10 years from now, but win and win soon. And I think there's the next best guy on the list to do that is Jim Harbaugh. I'm taking Jim Harbaugh number 3.
All right, I got Dan Campbell at number 3.
Okay, all right.
Me, the turnaround he did with Detroit and the way where he's gotten that program in a short number of years. Clearly, the buy-in. I think he's like the perfect mix of CEO, but also a smart hirer of assistants. Like that's something that gets overlooked in terms of skill sets for coaches. Yeah. I think that's like Sirianni. Like has to be given credit for hiring good assistant coaches. Well,
Campbell, wait a minute. According to reports, it was not him who hired Vic Fangio and Kellen Moore last year, because he was one who hired
even
Sean,
then, but like
he was one who hired Sean Desai. That it was Howie Roseman that came in and said, I let you hire Sean Desai. And I can't remember who was the offensive coordinator for the other year when they lost in the playoffs after the Super Bowl.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, no, look that up. Because I'm listen.
Well, he still hired Shane Steichen during his first stint.
And he said, okay, my boss hired you, but I'm still going to give you. I'm going to run this team and give you the room to flourish.
Yeah.
So I give you that.
So you got to give credit there, but Dan Campbell's number 3 for me.
Are you say 4 next?
Jim Harbaugh. Yeah, so they were
okay.
They were right
there. I'm glad. I was worried you were going to think I was crazy.
No,
you agree with me.
I think he's really good, man. I mean, it's history and also even just what he did last year with that team wasn't in a great place.
He made the defense better. He's an offensive guy, and the defense became instant jump. not slow build.
Yeah.
And he's coming off of winning a
And he made
championship
Herbert more efficient.
winning a championship at Michigan, knows the college game, knows which the NFL is so much of the college game. He's open to change, and yet he still was like a run the football dominant. Listen, I get it. I get it. He rubs people the wrong way, and I get it that he might not be your coach for 10 years, but for 4 years or 5 years, you're going to be competing for your division, and you're going to have a guy who knows how to run a football team.
Yep. No, he just knows it. He's really good.
I love hearing that. At 4, I go Kyle Shanahan. Kyle Shanahan, to me, is the first coach on this list.
He's the one I said was the most interesting of all of them to evaluate.
Yeah, so he's the one. I know this about him. Like I know Andy Reid, and like I know Sean McVay, I know this about Kyle Shanahan. I know that Kyle Shanahan has a system that when it is healthy and running well can evolve and be extremely dominant. That he will also find players that work for his system, but also be really good at saying, hey, this is what you're good at. All right, that's interesting. I'm going to play with that. So I think Kyle Shanahan, above all of the other offensive guys that you could put on this list, I think he belongs as the third, like, true offensive kind of genius guy. We don't think of Harbaugh as offensive genius. We think of Harbaugh as like this incredible CEO who has a personality with his offense, but it's not like an offensive genius. He's not a guru. McVay and Reid are guru geniuses, and Shanahan, I firmly believe, is that. What Shanahan was able to do with Jimmy Garoppolo and Matt Ryan and now doing it with Brock Purdy, I truly think it's
incredible.
It's
4
incredible
championship appearances, 2 Super Bowls. With those guys is remarkable.
And I also know now that we now know that it really was an ownership / management decision to go for Trey Lance. And now we know that because they've gone all in with Brock Purdy, because Shanahan's like, just give me the guy I'm telling, like, just let me work with the guy who actually can accurately throw the football. Yeah. And I again, I'm not guaranteeing that Kyle Shanahan's going. There might be guys below this list who might have a slightly higher Super Bowl ceiling. Like we've seen Kyle Shanahan choke, but again, if I have Kyle Shanahan in my building, I know my football team's going to be well coached with an identity. And he's in charge, and the players respect him. And so I value that over a lot of other things.
Yeah, he comes in at number 5 for me. So we're right there. I agree with everything you said, and I also think that they've gone about things in probably the best possible way that you can, in terms of they have those 4 highly productive years, right? And he's doing it with poor quarterback play, or comparatively to the rest of the league. He's getting the most out of the worst in terms of his contemporaries. And then in the years where injuries exploited those weaknesses at the quarterback position, because they had some key injuries that then showed how limited Garoppolo was, or how limited Purdy can be. They win a modest 5 or 6 wins, and then they get into a better draft position. Now, they didn't have the ability to use a lot of those draft picks because of the Trey Lance deal and all of that. But nonetheless, they've gone about it in a way where I'm going to get you high production, and then if it falls off the rails because we don't have the quarterback, then we may fall on our face for 1 year, but we're right back at it the next year, going to the conference championship game. He has this ability to like bounce back. Whereas, that's juxtaposed with a Tomlin who isn't getting you those conference championship appearances, those Super Bowl appearances, but he's also not getting you the 6-win seasons. I'd rather take that Shanahan, of the last 7 years, that run where you sprinkle in a couple really bad years, versus just mediocrity all throughout. And I think he's walked that tightrope very well over these years, and that's a credit to his ability to coach up quarterbacks. I mean, can you imagine what the 49ers be like with any of the top 8 quarterbacks in the league? I mean, that I think they would be the top 3 team in the NFL, like no question, right?
Yeah.
So
I agree. I think he's unique. And that's why I have him so high on this list. He So at number 5, so we're gonna have difference.
you haven't said Dan Campbell yet,
I
have
have
you?
not, and I will not say Dan Campbell at 5. And
Wow. All right.
I will tell you right now,
Damn.
Dan, I did this list through 7, and Dan Campbell came in at 7. So I love Dan Campbell. I love Dan Campbell. I think Dan Campbell has a chance to move really high up this list, like to number 3. I think he's right. He can be right there once I see what happens this year. This year he has no Aaron Glenn and he has no Ben Johnson. So when I see with my eyes what Dan Campbell is with this organization going for now, if they win 9-10 games, and they look good and they're competitive, I think Dan Campbell will shoot up to number 3. The concern for me, honestly, is there's a tiny
huge regression.
There's a tiny thing in my gut that says, what if they just fall off the map? What if they fall apart? And maybe it's physically they fall apart, but how does Dan Campbell manage that and handle that? I love Dan Campbell. I think he's at 7, but I think I get a higher floor and I know more what I'm getting with the 2 guys I put ahead of him. So can I give you the 2 guys I put ahead of him at 5 and 6?
Yeah.
Okay.
Please.
So again, these are guys I think a higher floor, and I just feel I know more in my gut what I'm getting with them. At number 5, I go with John Harbaugh. John Harbaugh is the one guy, in my opinion, of the Tomlin, Carroll, I even considered Belichick, older guard, Mike McCarthy, that has a ring, but the ring is now old.
Mm-hmm.
He's the one guy who I can sit here and go, he continues to adapt and manage his franchise at the highest of levels. And when you look at what he went in the transition still from Joe Flacco to Lamar Jackson and how he is just, again, a CEO of CEOs, I'm so impressed. I'm so impressed. You don't see stories of the Ravens player driving 110 DUI. The way they handled Tucker, kicking him out of the building this year and all of that, and we're not talking about the drama around that. Now, maybe it's because he's a kicker, not a quarterback and all these other things. But I think a lot of that is Harbaugh. And I think a lot now is that the Ravens or is that Harbaugh or is it they've been together for so long it's both? I don't know how to separate it. But I know if I'm in this draft and I have all of these things, he's not as skilled as Shanahan. He's not as skilled as his brother or McVay or Reed. But I think truly he's the one guy with the energy, the passion, the knowledge, and the wherewithal to stay current with 2025 football while also still not being a brilliant specialist at one thing. I mean, Dan, you battle the Ravens every year. They're infuriating. How does he do it? I think you can speak on that as well as anyone. He's an infuriating guy to go up against year after year within your division. They just don't miss a beat. They don't have these years where things fall off the map. They don't have these drama-filled seasons. He handled the Lamar Jackson contract controversy brilliantly. I mean, he's just as steady as they come, and I think for me, I know what I'm getting with John Harbaugh, 100%.
I think there's definitely an argument you can make. I would put Tomlin ahead of him, but I think they're right on top of each other, regardless of where they are in a list. The only reason I say that is it's the hard thing to evaluate with Tomlin is he has not had a quarterback in 6 years, and the Ravens are able to get Lamar Jackson with the 32nd overall pick. If they don't have him, where are they now? I have a lot of questions about that, and we'll never know.
Yeah, but he also handled that when they drafted him. No one thought they would draft a quarterback, and he handled that transition really, really well. And I'll say this:
he did. He gets credit for that.
He has created a franchise that let Lamar Jackson win 2 of the last 4 MVPs or whatever it is, 3 MVPs. So
Yep.
I think that's a credit to him. And I'm not saying if I get John Harbaugh, I get Lamar Jackson, right? But if I get John Harbaugh, I get an absolute adult in the room who's very well respected, who I think, unlike Tomlin a little bit, this is where I give him the edge, understands 2025 football really well.
You're correct.
And I think, again, also, what does Harbaugh have that maybe Tomlin doesn't? He's got a little bit of a coaching tree. Like, look at what McDonald's already doing in Seattle in 1 year. We thought that was a weird hire. He's came in and they had a very productive, fine year. And now the arrow's putting up. I think that Harbaugh, again, high ceiling guy. So it's not flashy. It's not flashy. But I'm looking at this as far as I have the 5th pick, those 4 guys off the board. I'm gonna trust him. Yeah. And the only other guy I would put ahead of Dan Campbell right now, and it's a guy that scares me to death, and I hate it, but I absolutely respect the hell out of him right now. It's Kevin O'Connell. I think Kevin O'Connell is bordering on special. I think he's bordering on special. And I think that, again, with like Dan Campbell, we're going to learn a lot about Kevin O'Connell this year. If Kevin O'Connell turns Mike McCarthy into a Pro Bowl quarterback, throwing 28-plus touchdowns and winning 10, 11-plus games, I might have to blow my brains out. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do, right? Like, what am I supposed to do with that? I truly think that Kevin O'Connell has what he did last year with Sam Darnold and handling the controversy. Your first-round pick's injured. There was a quarterback controversy. Now it's all on Sam. And the way they hot knife through butter with those wide receivers, and there's no drama. There's no Justin Jefferson demanding the ball. It's just brilliant offensive football. He also has the smarts to bring in Brian Flores and say, dude, just do you, and create one of the great defensive coordinators in the NFL. I think Kevin O'Connell is a former quarterback. He also has this air about him. He's 6'5". He's this big, strong presence, really great at the microphone.
Worked California cool
from Sean McVay's system as well. I think again, it's a little bit of the upside pick. I'll be honest, it's a little bit of the upside pick, but I look at Kevin O'Connell versus Sean Payton versus Mike Tomlin versus Mike Vrabel versus Dan Campbell, the next guys on my list, and I say, fuck it, I'm going to go upside, offensive genius in entering the prime of his career, and is doing something that has just been very, very impressive with Kirk Cousins and Sam Darnold, and now he's got a chance to prove it with the high first-round draft pick in Mike McCarthy.
Yeah,
I mean not JJ McCarthy, not Mike McCarthy, JJ.
JJ. I mapped it out 6 through 10 as well, and so it goes Tomlin, Harbaugh, LaFleur, O'Connell, and Sirianni.
So LaFleur's hard. LaFleur's up there. It's a good name.
He went to 4 straight conference championships now. Yes, he had Aaron Rodgers.
But he's done very well in 2 years, 2 straight playoff appearances with Jordan Love.
And I think it's been even more apparent now that we know that Jordan Love isn't the god that, people were making him out to be after his first, however many starts.
On LaFleur. I would take LaFleur probably over Tomlin, probably over Vrabel.
Maybe. I think 6 through 10 is a bucket.
It's like the quarterback. It's like the quarterback discussion. 6 through 10 is where the debate is.
Yeah. No, it's that's where it gets like difficult when you're having to parse through some differences.
Yeah.
But they're all kind of the same in some ways. For
now,
sure.
Is there one guy of the names you named? Because I said, like, Dan Campbell to me has the chance to skyrocket up this list, or honestly has a chance to maybe.
Yeah,
like,
Kevin O'Connell.
So you're with. I agree. Kevin O'Connell's another, like, he's a shaker and a mover. Like, if Kevin O'Connell is playing for a Super Bowl next year with JJ McCarthy, or in an NFC title game again with with JJ McCarthy, how do you not look at him and say he's the guy we need to really move some guys down and move him up?
I feel like Dan Quinn is a guy that could put himself into the top 10 pretty easily as well.
He made an NFC title game.
People will say it's the quarterback, but what he did with that defense, it was a good defense last year too. I mean, just the fact that regardless of whether or not you got great play out of the quarterback, you got to be doing something right as the head coach to take that organization and get that close to a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
impressive stuff. All right, well, that was fun. That was good stuff. And we've got one more week now that we're gonna where we can talk teams next week potentially. Who we like the power rankings, the top.
Yeah, maybe top
Who we
5
see as
teams, bottom 5 teams. I like that. I
yeah,
think that could
yeah.
be I think that could be fun.
And then after that, it's like training camps will start getting underway. We're gonna take a couple weeks off in July as well.
Yep.
So when we come back after that point, we're gonna be just a couple weeks away from the preseason.
There'll be a lot of news. There'll be a lot of
Yeah.
news and a lot of things to get into. We'll have to start making predictions for uh, conferences and divisions and stuff like that. And we'll have to get some fantasy guests on. I know we got the fantasy podcast on the network here, and so it'd be fun to get those guys in maybe sometime early August before right before your drafts head off, just to give us an idea, to give us some pointers so we can hopefully beat them this year in fantasy.
Yes.
That would be a lot of fun.
And please go to the For Fantasy Sake QC Facebook page or For Fantasy Sake QC.com. Go check it out. Sign up for the Toys for Tots League. It's a great league to be a part of. You'll get to compete against us as well. You get to choose which show and all of that stuff that you get to compete with and against. But obviously all for a good cause. We've raised over $6,000 in just the last few years for Toys for Tots and all of the local chapters for our hosts here. So it's a great thing, and hoping to get even more this year. Going to have dozens upon dozens of teams, hopefully. So please go sign up. And it's a great thing to be a part of. So
For sure.
Appreciate that support there. And we will see you here next week for that the top and the bottom lists for who are the 2025 golden childs and who are those that are
the redheaded stepchildren. Yes.
Yes, exactly. We shall see. We will find out soon enough. But yeah, appreciate the support, everybody. You can check us out at FB Lounge Pod. And as always,